What is up? Welcome to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great Friday evening. In today's episode, what we'll be discussing is a 2022 NBA Redraft done by ESPN. Was listening to the Hoop Collective podcast earlier today, and they did theirs. I made a graphic so you guys can follow along in on this conversation because I have my opinions with it. I'm sure you guys do as well. Has a lot of people across social media talking. I do want to give a little PSA and an update. So we will be doing a schedule release podcast on Monday. Initially, we were supposed to have it today, but the guest that we were trying to lock in had some, stuff come up. Life happens. It's okay. But Monday at 7, we'll be doing a schedule release podcast, um, and it should be fun. Someone I've never had on the podcast before, so I'm really excited for it. But let's get into today's episode. So, this is the redraft. So, we're going to go over it and I'll kind of fill you guys in who is drafted in this place because this order is all scrambled, as you guys can see with this graphic that I did make in Photoshop today. But let's start with the first overall pick. You guys remember the first overall pick in the 22 draft was Paolo Banchero by the Orlando Magic. ESPN with their redraft would actually have Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder being the first overall pick for the Orlando Magic. If you guys do remember, Jalen Williams was actually the 12th overall pick in the 22 draft. So they have J-Dub going as high as 1 in this one. And here's the thing. I'm still probably going to select Paolo Banchero first overall. I don't know about you guys. I like Jalen Williams as a player. He's an NBA champion. Had a really good playoffs, played with the injured wrist. But listen, I'm still going to take Paolo in this situation, in this redraft. No disrespect to Jalen Williams. When I look at Paolo Banchero and the type of player that he's going to be, I think he's just scratching the surface. I think he's a power forward that could definitely be in MVP conversations for years to come. I think once he gets more of a consistent three-point shot, that's really going to open up his game. I think the addition of Desmond Bane this year for the Magic is really going to help him as well. But I'm still taking Paolo Banchero 1. I don't care what ESPN says. I don't care how high they are on Jalen Williams. I think not taking Paolo is just crazy to me. I don't know about you guys. Let me know if you're watching live on YouTube, if you're going to select Paolo Banchero. Still at 1 if you're the Orlando Magic. So number 2, they had the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting Paolo. Now, if you guys remember in the 22 draft, this was actually where Chet Holmgren was selected. So they're taking Paolo in this situation. Now, in the event that for whatever reason he slipped, yeah, you're probably taking Paolo Banchero, number 2 overall. If you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think Paolo and OKC would just be nasty. I mean, can you imagine like an SGA and a Paolo Banchero tandem? Like that would just be absolutely filthy. Thank God that didn't happen because that would be a dynasty if you ask me. But he does go to in this redraft. With the third overall pick, they had Chet Holmgren going 3. Now, if you guys remember, the third overall pick in this draft was actually Jabari Smith. So Jabari Smith does fall down in this redraft quite a bit. We'll talk about him in a couple of draft selections, but they have Chet Holmgren going 3rd to the Rockets. I kind of like the fit. I think Chet in Houston would be fun. But I still remember that draft like vividly. Like there was a lot of conversation, like who was going to go 1 between Chet and Paolo, and a lot of people were shocked that Paolo went 1. Even the Magic's, front office said they didn't know who they were going to take until the night of the draft, which is kind of crazy. But as Pistons fans, we kind of heard the same thing with the Cade draft. But I think we're pretty happy who he took. But Chet going 3 to the Houston Rockets. Number 4, Sacramento Kings. Now, this is probably the one where it doesn't really surprise me because if you watch some Denver Nuggets basketball, Christian Braun is a hell of a player. Now, this is where Keegan Murray was actually drafted 4th overall by the Kings. Christian Braun, 3-and-D wing, averaged 15 points a game this season. for the Denver Nuggets. I don't really hate this pick, but I kind of think it's a little bit of a reach as high as 4 if you are doing a redraft, but I don't really hate it. I just think it's kind of high in my personal opinion. I like Christian Braun. I think a big reason why they decided to move off of Michael Porter Jr. this offseason, you guys, is because Christian Braun showed the Nuggets front office that he's a rotational piece that can really help them win. And they got Cam Johnson out of it. They're bringing back Bruce Brown, and they added more depth with all the money that they were spending on Michael Porter Jr. They kind of fill out their bench. Even got, one-time Pistons and Hardaway Jr. on the vets minimum. So I will be watching some Nuggets games because the Nuggets are my league pass team. Outside of being a Piston fan, I really like watching the Denver Nuggets. Number 5, the Detroit Pistons. Now, they selected Jaden Ivey with this pick. I remember going into the 2022 NBA draft, you guys, and I was like, if Ivey's there at 5, you have to select him. There was a lot of debate whether Keegan Murray or Jaden Ivey were going to be there at 5, but in this redraft, they had the Pistons selecting Jabari Smith Jr. Now, I was hoping as a Piston fan, I fall in love with these prospects. I really thought Jabari Smith Jr., if he was there at 5, if you're the Pistons, you have to take him. But obviously, I think his ceiling a little bit, maybe it was a little bit overhyped coming out of college. Not to say he's a bad player whatsoever. I think he's going to play a big role with the Houston Rockets this year. But Jabari Smith Jr. at 5 in this redraft by ESPN. Number 6, Keegan Murray. Now, Keegan Murray initially was the 4th overall pick by the Sacramento Kings. They have him going to the Pacers. And this is where Benedict Mathurin was actually selected. And if you look on this graphic, he's way down on the list. Keegan Murray to the Indiana Pacers. Now, Murray had a really good rookie season, shooting the ball from 3. I think he shot over 40% from 3, if I remember correctly. But his numbers have kind of dipped as of late. Maybe it's because he plays with a lot of high usage guards on his team. It'll be interesting to see how he does this year. But if the Pacers were fortunate enough to get Keegan Murray, that's just nasty, man. That's crazy. Pacers are a really good basketball team too. So when I saw that, I was like, wow, you really think the Pistons would pass on Keegan Murray? I don't know about that, man. I probably would have drafted Keegan Murray if this was kind of like the draft part, if I'm being honest. I know that's where Ivy went, but I mean, if you guys remember at the time, the Pistons were really bleak on 3-and-D wings. We really didn't have a whole lot. But 6, Keegan Murray to the Pacers. Number 7, Walker Kessler. Now, he initially went to the Utah Jazz with that pick, and that's where Shaedon Sharpe actually went. Walker Kessler, I don't hate it. I don't. I think I probably still would have rolled the dice for Shaedon Sharpe personally. I really liked his upside. I know he didn't play any college ball, but if you did watch some of his highlights in college, you could tell it was going to translate. And he's been a really good player in his short career so far with the Portland Trailblazers. It'll be interesting to see what he does this upcoming season with them. But Walker Kessler, guess you can't really argue the rim protection and what he's done. It's kind of hard to evaluate him, though, because he hasn't really had good guard play around him in Utah. But number 7 to the Portland Trailblazers. Number 8, Dyson Daniels. Nothing really changed here. This was one of Trajan's picks, by the way. And he's right where he was during a redraft from ESPN. There's a lot to like about Dyson Daniels. One of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, in my personal opinion. Still kind of blows my mind that New Orleans decided to move off of him. You really saw what he did this year in Atlanta. I think a big reason why Atlanta won a lot of their games is because Dyson Daniels' defense kept them in games. So, in a redraft, I tend to agree here. I think he's still at least a top 10 pick in this redraft. Number 9 to the San Antonio Spurs. This guy wasn't even a first round pick, but I think if you watch the playoffs, you watch some Pacers games this year, Andrew Nebhart at least needs to be in the conversation for a lottery pick. The fact that he did slip out of the first round kind of boggles my mind. But if you guys remember, the Spurs actually drafted Jeremy Sohan, I believe is how you say his last name, from Baylor. But Andrew Nebhart in a San Antonio Spurs jersey, man, that would be crazy if you ask me. But um, wouldn't really hate it for the Spurs either. I think he would be such a perfect fit for them. Um, and that's all I'll really say. Like I really fell in love with him. Watching the playoffs this year, I think his usage is just going to be through the roof with no Halliburton this upcoming season. But you got Andrew Nebhart here. 9 don't really have anything to say about it negatively. I think in that part, if he did do a redraft, he probably is a lottery pick of what we know now, being able to defend at a high level and score the basketball the way he can score it and shoot it. Number 10, we have a Detroit Piston here. Jalen Duren. Now, Jalen Duren, if you guys remember, he was a very late lottery pick. He was selected with the Hornets draft pick, which was later traded to the Detroit Pistons in a 3-team deal with the New York Knicks and the Hornets and the Pistons. But he's going number 10 here. And who went number 10 for the Wizards is Johnny Davis. Man, I remember having conversations about Johnny Davis, and I wasn't too high on him. And I kind of sound smart now, so I kind of pat myself on the back a little bit. But Jalen Duren in Washington, I think would be a really good value pick for them, especially the back end of the lottery. Obviously, they have bigs now like Alex Sarr and others, but JD in Washington, don't really know how his career would kind of pan out if he did get selected by the Wizards there. Um, those are the conversations that I always think about, and like when we do these redrafts, like how would their career path maybe change a little bit? Because I think situation is everything. I don't really know if Jalen Duren would develop or regress if he did get selected by the Wizards that we're starting to, kind of get into that rebuilding mode in 2022. Now, number 11, another former Detroit Piston, Jaden Ivey, goes 11 in this redraft. Now, at 11, the Knicks drafted, I'm going to butcher this guy's last name, uh, Osu Osami Dieng, probably. I probably butchered that, but they drafted him. They later traded it to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They traded a couple of picks that actually OKC did to trade up to that spot. But they have Jaden Ivey going here. And if you guys remember, like the Knicks were really high on Jaden Ivey. There was a lot of talk with the Detroit Pistons and the New York Knicks. I remember reading an article from James Edwards when he was here as a beat reporter for The Athletic that the Knicks did call the Detroit Pistons to try to trade for Jaden Ivey. And obviously the Pistons didn't, accept that trade. But Jaden Ivey to the Knicks, that's interesting. And I think when you look at Ivy, I think a lot of people don't like that he fell out of the top 5. And I could understand it from a Pistons fan's perspective, but I will say this. I think if you look at everyone um, in the top 10, they've somewhat had consistency, in their careers. And I mean somewhat. Like there's some players on here that can't shoot the basketball like Dyson Daniels, but he's an elite defender. Jabari Smith Jr. Still doesn't really have a handle, but I think the Pistons would kind of swing on the upside there of him being available, and they didn't really have that wing depth at the time. I still think Jaden Ivey in a redraft is at least in the top 8. But I just don't really know what team would like take a swing at him of what we know now. And I think it's fair to say he hasn't had the easiest road his first 3 years in the league. And obviously, a lot of that has to do with roster construction, coaches that didn't want to play him, and then getting injured this year. I think a lot of what I've seen with Jaden Ivey, whether it's shooting guard rankings, redrafts, he has to really just come out and dominate and prove these national people wrong. That's all it's going to take. Until then, he's going to probably be out of the top 10 in redrafts. He's going to not be highly regarded as a top shooting guard in the league right now. just because there's a lot of uncertainty from national people. I think here locally we do a pretty good job of covering him as a player and what's been going on through his first 3 years of his NBA career. A lot of it is not really his fault. Last 2 years hasn't really been his fault. He had a coach that preferred to play Killian Hayes over him, and this past season he only played 30 games because of reckless dive for a basketball from Cole Anthony. But until he really proves people wrong, I think you're going to see more of this. You're going to see these redrafts of him, at the back end of the lottery. But said my piece on it, and that's why I feel that Jaden Ivey has kind of been, I don't want to say disrespected because I don't really think it's disrespectful, but I think the way people talk about him nationally, I think that's why. I mean, there's other people they're very high on him, but from the ESPN guys, they're not as high on Jaden Ivey as they are Jalen Duren, for that matter. More ESPN guys are more high on Jalen Duren than they are Ivy. So that kind of tells you like what they think of JD over Jaden Ivey. At number 12, Oklahoma City had this pick, and they select Tari Eason in this redraft. Now, if you guys remember, J-Dub, Jalen Williams was actually the number 12 pick in the 2022 draft. Tari Eason was drafted by the Rockets. I don't remember what pick exactly, but I like this pick for this redraft. I think it does make a whole lot of sense if you are the Thunder. You're getting a guy that can defend, shoot threes. He's a good player. He's a good player. He's just kind of had his like injury history, but when he's available, when he does get to play with Houston, I like him a lot as a player. Kind of low key, like wish he was on the Pistons. Like I've always liked this game. Number 13, Charlotte Hornets in this redraft, they have them taking Shaden Sharp, actually. Now, Shaden Sharp, if you guys remember, went as high as 7 in the 2022 NBA draft by the Portland Trailblazers. They have the Hornets selecting him with the 13th overall pick. If you kind of just look at Charlotte and their core, that would actually be kind of fun. Like him and LaMelo Ball playing together in the backcourt. I think it'd be actually a lot of fun. Really athletic backcourt, bouncy backcourt. I could definitely see Shaden Sharp catching a lot of lobs from LaMelo Ball, but I find it hard to believe that he would fall out of the top 10. I just do. I think with all the hype with him coming out of the draft, I still think even with what we know now in his first couple of years in the league, he's still at least a top 10 pick, in my personal opinion. I don't know about you guys, but I'm still pretty high on Shaden Sharp. I'm a Shaden Sharp truther, if that's what you want to call it. I was kind of surprised to see him as low as 13 and the back end of the NBA draft lottery with this redraft. And the final pick in this one, you guys, Benedict Mathurin. Now, Benedict Mathurin was the 6th pick initially in the 2022 NBA draft. And the Cavs selected Okachi. I'm not even going to. Okachi Ajabaj. He went to Kansas. I know I'm butchering them. I see these last names that are, a lot of syllables, a lot of vowels. I struggle a little bit, but I apologize. I apologize. But I took Mathurin at 14. I feel like it's such a value pick if you're the Cavs. I know he's come off the bench for Rick Carlisle. He went 6 to the Pacers. I feel like he might fall in a redraft. I don't know if he'd fall as far as 14 though. I know the playoffs he had it's kind of up and down, especially in the finals, but he's still a pretty good basketball player. He can defend, he can score, talk some shit. He talks a lot of shit actually. But him falling to 14 was kind of wild. This whole NBA redraft, I think pissed a lot of people off, especially like when you just kind of look at it and Paolo Banchero isn't even like the first overall pick in this one. Jabari Smith with the Pistons. I was really high on Jabari Smith. I remember doing like, NBA draft videos in 22. I was really hoping the Pistons were able to get at least a top three pick. Obviously, they get shafted and get five. Um, but I don't really know like what the Pistons would do if they were in a situation where they have a redraft and they have their choices of like Keegan Murray, Jabari Smith, um, you know, Andrew Nebhart of like what they know now. Like, would they take a swing on a guy like that? I'm not really entirely sure. I wouldn't hate it if they did select Jabari Smith Jr. at five, guys. I really wouldn't, because I was pretty high on him, and I still think he's a good role player. Um, I think he would be a really good fit in Detroit. I know a lot of people are going to definitely voice their opinions on the Jalen Duren, and I think more Jaden Ivey than anything else, and I get it. Ivy being as high as five, going down to 11 to the Knicks, I think is probably the one thing that you guys might disagree with. You might disagree with, excuse me, Walker Kessler being as high as seven in this redraft as well. But let me know what you guys think of this 2022 NBA redraft by ESPN. What picks don't you agree with? I don't agree with the Paulo Banchero pick over Jalen Williams. I think Christian Braun is a little high for my liking, as high as four by the Sacramento Kings. Jaden Ivey, I'm sure a lot of you guys will leave your comments, but maybe there's someone in this lottery that ESPN didn't consider that you think should be a lottery pick if they were to do a 2022 NBA redraft. I will talk to you guys down below in the comment section. We will be back tomorrow with another short form podcast. Wanted to give you guys some weekend content to enjoy. But until next time, you guys, have a good night. And as always, go Pistons. Peace.